Fabrice the Artist here, back with part 2 of roasting and critiquing my followers' art. Let's dive right into it. So first up we have Harry Potter, Hermione, and Ron Weasley. So the first thing that jumps out to me here is the values could be a little bit better. Like the parts of the jacket here and parts of the background are like a medium gray tone when they clearly should be closer to a black. And I'm not sure if you used charcoal in this drawing or not, but you definitely could have used some form of charcoal on some of these darker parts. The second thing that sticks out to me is how much you rushed some of these things, like the background, like these little people in the background. Just because something's in the background doesn't mean that it's not important. The way you drew the three faces here is actually really quite good, but everything else is very weak, and I feel like that takes away from the quality of the drawing as a whole. Like the jacket is super rushed. You can tell that you didn't really blend in a lot of these values together. The background is super rushed and really not really refined at all. You look like you have some ghost kids in the background from like a horror movie or something. So it's almost a little bit creepy. But I really like the way that you did the faces. There's a huge resemblance in their faces, but I would recommend just not rushing some of the parts that you clearly did rush, like the background and stuff like that. Another thing that I would change is the hair. I would have liked to see you use a Tombow Mono Zero eraser to capture some of those whiter highlights. I think you need to spend a little bit more time on looking at the individual shapes of and little sections of the hair, right? So it's important to follow different shapes of the hair down the page so that they follow each other and don't cross over each other. And this kind of destroys the illusion that you're trying to create of realistic hair. But great job on the values and the proportions, but pay a little bit more closer attention to the jacket and the background. Next up we have Walter White. I drew this exact same picture a couple years ago. They did a really great job. The values here are great. The jacket is nice and dark. The beard is nice and dark, so those values are really great. The proportions, as far as I can tell, are nearly perfect. But I would have liked to see you put a little bit less emphasis on the pure details and getting some of the values and contrasts of the face a little bit better. The face is super flat. There's no contrast between darker spots and brighter spots. So I could tell, like the parts of the forehead, that you got almost all the detail in there. Like, that's great. It looks to me as well like you used a Posca paint pen for the little white highlights in the beard. I would have liked to see you probably just try to erase those in with a Tombow Mono Zero eraser. Quickest things that I would change here would be the shading on the ear here should be darker. The eyes should be darker. The frame of the glasses should be completely black instead of a dark gray. That should pop more. And I think some of the details on the forehead are way too light, okay? So you can't really see them or appreciate them very much. Great job on this one, especially on the proportions and the values. Next, we have Tommy Shelby. This one really pops beautifully. It stands out. I really like this one. The background is beautifully dark. The hair is beautifully dark. The sweater here, it's out of focus and really dark, which makes the face just pop. So there's a huge contrast here, which they did very well. I really like the details on the face, so you really nailed these here. I think the hair is really good. I think it looks to me like you did use a precision eraser to get some of those whiter highlights, the few that are there at least. The details on the forehead are phenomenal. The ears are almost out of focus, which I'm assuming is exactly what the picture was looking like. So really great job doing that. To me, it's clear that you used the Tombow Mono Zero eraser on the very subtle hair parts right here, the highlights. So that was really well done. The thing that sticks out to me, and I'm nitpicking here, is the pupils or the iris are not completely round. It looks to me like you didn't accurately capture the shape of the iris. I think you probably could put a little bit more detail into the eye. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly to the picture, but throwing in a little bit more detail into the iris is a nice touch. I think you could look a little bit more closely to the eyelashes as well. Some of them look a little bit too thick, and the ones on the bottom almost look a little bit too dark, almost to the point where it looks like he's wearing eyeliner or something. The line that you created right here, that thin line right here, looks really great. However, it looks a little bit shaky. So I think if you clean that up, that would be another really good touch. But other than that, this is a very strong portrait of Tommy Shelby, so great job. This one, I don't know who this is exactly, but I really like the details on the face and the sweater here. It looks to me like you did use a precision eraser to get some of those little details on the sweater, which was a really nice touch. But what stands out to me is that friggin' microphone, man. Like, why did you rush that so much? Like, to me, this is a really good drawing. The details on the face are really, really good. You got some good contrast. I think you could be a little bit darker shadow under here. I think probably you could go just a little bit darker on some of those darker values, like the eyebrows and the shadow between the lips. The background is really quite good. I like the details on the neck and the sweater, but that friggin' microphone just ruins it for me. And I think that you used a Posca marker on the head of the microphone, which kind of stands out. I think you should have probably used a precision eraser instead of using like the scratchiness of like the Posca paint pen to make those white details. I don't know if this microphone is crooked in the picture, but that's not really important so much as I think that the shape of it just looks unnatural, right? It's not coming down perfectly symmetrical. Real life objects like that are cylindrical, it's very hard to do. And unless your lines are completely parallel, it's going to look quite artificial. This is something that a lot of people do, is they put a ton of time into the details of the face and then they completely just shit the bed on either the background or little things like the microphone that they think maybe isn't that as important. And that's exactly what I used to do too, like, oh, put so much effort in the face and oh, I'm almost done and I'm just gonna try to get this done and it's good enough. But I'm telling you, like, this drawing would be way friggin' better if you didn't rush some of those other parts. Great job on the face, but just be patient with the entire drawing. Either don't draw that microphone at all and just leave the sweater, or commit to doing it as good as you can, and I'm not convinced that you did do that as good as you can. So great job on that, but just work on those parts. Next we have John Shelby, I believe is his name. This one's really good. I really love the proportions on this one. The hat might be squished on this side, but I'm not entirely sure with the picture. I think the proportions are really good. The values of the sweater are great. I think from seeing this picture before, I think the hat and the face to me are looking a little bit too similar in tone. The hat should be much darker than the face. Although some of the details here on the hat are really, really good, I think that you could have gone much darker and had a much wider range of values on the hat, and that I think would have made the face pop just a little bit more and made it look a little bit more realistic. I think the background could be a little bit darker. Make sure that you're using a good charcoal, nice soft charcoal. You can even blend that in with your finger for a solid background such as this. I really like the value between the lips, so nice dark spot there, which really makes it look really realistic. This blending is really good. The details are very good. The only thing to me, like I said, that stands out is the hat could be a little bit darker. I'm not too sure about the ears either. His left ear looks to be a little bit flopped out a little bit. It almost looks like the hat is pasted on front of the ear. It doesn't look to me like it's sitting over top of the ear, but that actually might be the way that the picture is, or his ears might be sticking out a little bit more in the picture. I'm not too sure. So I'm not too critical about that. But yeah, just pay a little bit closer attention to the relative values between the hat and the face will pop a bit more. A little bit darker background, and that will go a long way. Next we have Angelina Jolie. Now, to me it seems like you picked one of the more frightening pictures of Angelina Jolie. I love drawing her. She's so beautiful. I mean, she looks beautiful here as well. However, her eyes to me look kind of creepy. I think the editing on this picture could be a lot better. I think the drawing actually probably looks a lot better than what you're displaying here. So it looks a little bit flat and a little bit dark. The tone of the sweater looks to me like it's probably white in your actual drawing, but that it looks like gray in this picture. The forehead looks a little bit washed out, and I think some of those highlights aren't showing. So I think you need to take a better picture and maybe turn the brightness and the highlights up a bit, turn some of the shadows down, and then this will look a lot better. But this is a very realistic drawing, and I can't be too sure, but it looks to me like you used a little bit of a paint pen in some of the white hairs here, or some of the lighter hairs. I think it would have been a lot better to use that precision Tombow eraser to get those in. I just don't find that the Posca marker looks very realistic when you're using it for anything other than like a white speck like that. I much prefer just erasing those lines in. It's a little bit more difficult, but it's gonna pay off and be way more realistic. So this drawing is quite good. However, I find things that contribute to a better drawing a lot of the time is choosing a more aesthetic or just a better photo to draw, right? Like instead of choosing a picture where they're like, ugh, you want to choose a picture that most flatters the person that you're drawing. Even if you captured this perfectly, it's like, it's just like a mediocre picture of Angelina Jolie. In my opinion, you should be searching for a much better reference picture to be doing, and then use that Tombow Mono Zero eraser on the hair and fix the editing on this, and it will look a lot better. So great job. And here we have LeBron James. This almost looks exactly like Charles Levasseur drawing. I'm pretty sure he did the same one, or maybe you drew his drawing, because it looks almost like his style. It almost looks like a mix between realism and like animated almost, right? You can tell it's not realistic, but yet it was drawn very realistic. I don't know if it's the exaggeration of the highlights on the face and the really dark contrast that makes this effect. I'm not too sure, but it is an interesting look. I really love the values in this. The background is really dark. The parts that are supposed to be really dark, like the spots under the eyes, the lips, shadow under the jaw, really well done. In my opinion, you really messed up the top lip. It looks like he has a fat lip, like he looks like he got punched in the mouth. So I think you need to pay a little bit more close attention to your proportions, because your overall composition and values and use of proper tone is really well done here, and the details are really well done as well. It looks to me like you did use a precision eraser for like those little highlights on the back of the head, which is a nice touch. Good job erasing those details in. The shape of the beard could be a little bit better. It looks not in line with his jaw, so definitely pay closer attention. It looks to me like he has his beard covering this part of his chin, and then this part of his chin is completely sticking out with no beard on it. But I realize that that's probably this, but it looks like it's this, okay? So just work on that. But to me, the values are great. The details here are very well done, but the weakest part of this is the proportions. And getting the proportions right is so important. Like, there's no way that something's going to look realistic if it's out of proportion, right? Like, you can ease up on some of the details and get the values and the proportions right, it can still look really good. But if those two things are perfect but the proportions are off, it's never gonna look good, okay? So just work on that. And here we have a drawing of the weekend. So the proportions on this one are really, really good. However, the one thing that sticks out to me is that the individual sections of different values don't look like they blend into each other. The shading right here, you can see the outline and the outline here, and then there's a separate outline where the eyebrow starts. So it looks like each individual section of value is not blended into each other, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain. So I think you could probably pay a little bit closer attention to the shading under the eyes right here, under the ridge of the eye. Just blend that in together a little bit better. The nose here, there's like a completely solid outline of a shading when it should be blended in to the darker shading around it. I'm almost seeing too many individual shapes. And I really like the hair. One thing that would go a long way, in addition to getting it properly dark like you did here, is adding in some lighter hairs with that precision Tombow eraser. That would have made it look a lot better instead of it looking just like one solid black shape on top of his head that you're just having to assume is his hair. What you could have done is just create one solid black shape similar to this and then draw in some of those hairs with the precision eraser. So great job on the proportions and the values. I think you could get a little bit more detail into the hair with that precision eraser. Just be aware of some of the solid blocks of shapes of values around the eyes, right? Try to blend them into each other so that that doesn't stand out. And here we have a drawing of Thanos. This is lacking in contrast big time. So it looks to me like you just use like one pencil here instead of using a wide variety of hardness of pencils. You could have tried a little bit of charcoal powder even for the background and the shading on the shoulder here. The quickest thing that would improve this is making the eyes darker, the ears darker, some of the details right in here, or some of the shadows rather, make those blacker, right? Like, you guys need to pay a little bit more closer attention to the relative values in the picture that you're drawing. If something is pure black, it's not going to look as realistic if you make it a dark gray here. Like I've said before, if you're using graphite, you know, the darkest you're gonna get is a dark gray, especially if you're using like a hard pencil, which it looks like you did here. So great job on that, but just get a little bit more blending here on the neck. And I'm not sure if the photo is like this, but the eyes aren't quite level. It looks like he's doing almost like a rock face like this. Just make sure that the proportions are a little bit more accurate and try to explore a little bit darker, a wider range of values, and it will pop that much more. And lastly, we have a Spiderman drawing. This one looks really cool. I love some of the highlights surrounding the leg and the highlights on the knee and how white the string of web that he's shooting is. That's really well done. I love the attention to detail and getting the darker edge of that knee right before the highlight on the leg is really well done. That line was really carried straight through very accurately. The background is nice and clean. I really like how he's almost popping out of the image. Okay, so his leg is actually sticking out of the background, which is a nice cool effect. It makes it really pop. I really like the blurry circles in the background. Like, those almost look like the little details on my Mike Tyson right here. So that's a really great job doing that. I think you could probably explore with some charcoal powder or some of these areas so that some of the darker values are a little bit richer, but it very well could look exactly like that in real life. It's just that maybe you could turn the shadows down just a little bit in the editing before you post it, if that is in fact what the drawing really looks like. But if it's not, I would just try to explore with some darker range of values. Okay, this is really good. I like how well you blend in some of the darker tones on the leg. The black parts around the eye right here are very well done. So amazing job on the blurriness of the lights in the background on the building. I love how it's out of focus. The lines of the building look like they're out of focus, so that's really nice. The proportions are great. The edge that you taped off in the background was really well done. I would perhaps suggest using some charcoal powder for the background to get it just that little bit smoother, right? It looks still a little bit blotchy, and that is really, really tough to overcome, but I would just recommend using charcoal powder. And then what you can do to blend that background in a little bit more is, after using the brush with the charcoal powder, use a tissue paper to blend that in even further. But just realize that when you blend it in with the tissue paper, it's going to lighten it. So make that background darker than you want it to be with the charcoal powder and the brush, and then blend it in with the tissue paper so that it is nice and smooth. But then it's gonna be overall lighter than what it originally was, but it'll be the exact tone that you were looking for anyway. Great job on that. Anyway, that concludes my second critiquing and roasting video. I hope you guys learned a thing or two. And if you don't want to miss videos like this in the future, feel free to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell. And if you're interested in learning from me in greater detail or owning a signed print, feel free to visit me on Patreon or shop my Etsy page. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in that next video. Peace.